Welcome. How many of you here have seen a TV program called Dragon's Den? At least a few of you. Shark Tank, same idea in the US. Yeah, well, this today is DevEx Den. I'm honored that the forum chose to put the name of my organization in front of Dragon's Den or Shark Tank. We're thrilled to have our name associated with it, but hopefully this is a bit more cerebral and certainly a slightly different focus than those TV programs. Today we're going to be talking about two projects focused on girls' education. But we're going to try to make them as real world as we can, and these are real projects that have reached a certain point in their evolution, and we're going to hear how they're going. And we've got two impassioned leaders behind these projects who are going to get up and tell us all about them and make their case. And we've got an incredible panel, including myself, 5 of us, who will be asking questions, maybe some tough ones if we can, and really try to kick the tires of these initiatives and see how they're working, see how they're going. And no actual money will change hands today, I'm told, at least not officially. But we're going to take this very seriously as though money is changing hands, and we'd love to get reactions from the audience as well. So welcome, and I'm looking forward to kicking this off. Let me just briefly tell you about the incredible panel that we have here. First of all, Joe Batik. Joe is the head of CSR for the Middle East and Africa for a small company you might have heard of called Ericsson. And so he is working with a number of corporations and government and civil society actors all across the region on lots of issues, including education. So thank you for being here and being part of our panel.
Pleasure.
Parastu Yousefi is a program officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, in particular in their global policy and advocacy team, covering a lot of the world, the Middle East and maybe China and India in part. So she's all over the map, and she's here today. Thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you for having me.
And we have Mr. Tariq Al-Gurg, who I think many of you know, those of you especially here from the UAE. He is the CEO of Dubai Cares, and he's had a long and distinguished career in banking before taking on this role in the humanitarian community, but he is one of the leaders on education. We're very delighted to have him join us. Thank you. He hasn't seen the TV show, by the way, so we're going to be improvising a bit. And then finally, Dr. Rhonda Grobe-Zachary, who she's the head of education at Porticus, which I don't know how many people know Porticus, but you should. And so Google it later. It's a kind of a family foundation and does a lot of work in education in particular. So thank you for being here today. And Dr. Grobe-Zachary is a couple of quick things I just thought I'd mention is that she's got a doctorate in neuroscience and a medical degree from Johns Hopkins. So in addition to many other things that she's doing, that may be useful background, hopefully slightly intimidating to our presenters. Okay, so we have 2 projects that we're going to hear about today, and we're going to start with one from Malawi called Theater for Change.
Great. Thanks very much indeed, Raj. Well, good afternoon, everybody. And I'd like to start by introducing you to someone. She's there right in front of you as a photo. Her name is Thokozile. She's 14 years old and lives in a village in the central region of Malawi. And she's one of the 9,000 girls in our Girls Education Challenge project. I want to tell you a little bit about her, about what could happen to her, and all girls like her as she grows up. Number 1, there's a 50% chance of her being married by the time she's 18, and not by her choice. Malawi is now the poorest country in the world, with a GDP of $226 per person per year. And there's more and more pressure on girls like Toko to stay at home, get married as soon as possible. That's 1 in 2 girls becoming girl brides, and that's the end of their education. 2, she's likely to have sex for the first time, again, probably not voluntarily, when she's 14 years old. And there's a 1 in 3 chance that she'll become pregnant before she's 18. 3, if she does go to school, she will face sexual harassment and abuse by male teachers as well as her peers. 4, there's a 44% chance that she will not feel able to go to school when she has her period. That works out as 1 week every month that she misses because of the stigma around menstruation. The result of this? Only 47% of girls in Malawi complete their primary school education. That's pretty shocking, isn't it? Theatre for a Change is an education organisation working to change this by enabling girls like Toko to get into school, stay in school, and be successful in school. Our hypothesis is that if you improve the sexual and reproductive health of these girls, they will be able to stay in school and learning will improve. So what are we doing to achieve this? We have trained 350 young female teachers who we call agents of change to be outstanding facilitators. These young, dedicated teachers are posted to 225 rural primary schools in central and southern Malawi, where female teachers very rarely work. They run girls' clubs for 9,000 in and out of school girls, giving them the knowledge, skills, and attitudes they need to be able to stay in school. And the Agents of Change also conduct in-service training for other teachers working in their school. Lastly, we work with the head teacher, the girls' parents, and the local community to improve understanding of the rights of the girl and to have a safe environment while they're in school. We've introduced child protection policies and procedures to every school that we work in. There was nothing before we started. In this way, we're creating what we might call circles of support around every girl like Toko. This project is part of the British government-funded GEC, Girls' Education Challenge, innovation window. So what's innovative about it? Firstly, it's the nature of how learning happens for the girls. We've heard today about the importance of pro-social learning. We've heard the importance of child-centered learning. We train these Agents of Change teachers, these young female teachers, to use a range of child-centered and physical learning approaches to sexual and reproductive health education. Girls are involved in physical and fun activities where they're encouraged to use their bodies and voices differently, to increase their self-worth and assertiveness, for example, with the Agent of Change acting as their role model and supporter. They model new behaviors by trying them out in a range of familiar situations. An example of this might be saying no to unwanted sexual advances. Unfortunately, something which girls have to put up with a lot. They practice saying the word no, first of all with their voices, differently. They sing it, they shout it, and then with their hands. What's it like to say no with your hands? With your feet, literally standing their ground. This in a culture where girls are brought up explicitly to obey men. They practice putting these vocal and physical skills into a situation they experience. This is learning by doing, a kind of muscle memory for behavior change. And by practicing these behaviors in a safe environment, they grow in confidence and self-esteem. They lose the shame so often attached to their bodies and learn to respect and appreciate their bodies and expect others to do the same. They learn physically and vocally how to assert their rights. Secondly, we encourage girls to work together as a group. The girls discover that they're not alone. They share their experiences with the other girls and find solutions together to the challenges they face. Their individual growth of confidence is multiplied and reinforced by the group. This is particularly evident in an activity that we use called touch tag improvisation, unique to Theatre for a Change, where the group watches a challenging situation from one of the girls' lives and then tags the person who needs help on the shoulder. They take over and try a different approach to the problem that the person is facing, with other members of the group coming in to experiment with alternative approaches until the group feels happy that a positive change has been brought about. It's a rehearsal for reality, as the girls support each other to practice communication skills that they can take into their lives. It's learning through collaboration and cooperation, and they're learning key skills like decision-making. The third part of innovation is how we challenge the social norms that surround the girls. We have devised a unique interactive radio drama where we focus on the challenges faced by a marginalized girl. As part of each broadcast, the audience, who are in listening clubs in all the teacher training colleges, schools, and communities are invited to suggest ways in which the girl could be helped. And they call in on their mobile phones, free of charge, to become a character in the drama and try out different approaches to the challenges that the character faces. This is an opportunity to challenge social norms such as child marriage and promote the rights of girls on a community and national level. It's a culturally acceptable and highly participatory format for changing the attitudes of parents and communities to girls and to their education. We currently have around 500,000 listeners across Malawi. So what are the results? Well, we've appointed an external consultancy to carry out a longitudinal study of the cohorts of girls in the project. And at the midline survey taken last June, they found that 92% of girls had re-enrolled in school. That's 92% of out-of-school girls coming back into school as a result of being members of this girls' club. 40% of the girls had increased in self-confidence. And there was a 49% of girls who believe they now have the power to make decisions in their own lives. The girls in the groups are significantly less sexually active than those in control groups. And finally, 18%, when we took this measure last June, felt more safe in school. But there's a lot more to do. We want to continue working with girls like Toko to enable them to progress to secondary school, a critical step to improving their life chances. We want to double the scale of this project in the next 5 years, reaching 18,000 of the most marginalized girls where the need is the greatest. And we have a memorandum of understanding with the government of Malawi to take this to scale and integrate this approach into teacher training on a national basis. We want to work through other, larger organizations to deliver similar projects in other countries, not replicating infrastructure, but training their staff to facilitate this approach for the most marginalized of girls. Theatre for a Change is accredited by the Open College Network in the UK to deliver this training as a qualification. And to do this, we need to train more outstanding agents of change, like the ones we have trained, but on an international basis, and expand our use of online learning fora. But this takes time and money, and this is where you come in. We need $17 million over 5 years. This will pay for the training of 1,500 female agent of change teachers and enable 18,000 marginalized girls to stay in school and have access to high-quality sexual and reproductive health education. It will pay for this process to be embedded in the education system through curriculum development. It will also pay for the expansion of the project into new geographies with new partner organizations, and it will pay to carry out further research into the impact of this approach on these cohorts of girls. Girls like Toko urgently need this project, and I know there's enough money and goodwill in this room to change her life and the life of thousands of other girls like her for good. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, it's tough to ask mean questions after such an impressive and impactful presentation, but we need to do that, panel. So, my fellow dragons, I turn to you, and maybe I'll kick us off quickly, which is, how can you assure any of the donors here that this $17 million won't just be, well, money well spent for the girls who receive this kind of training in your program, but then there'll be no lasting change in the country? I mean, do you have guarantees that the government will take this on afterwards, or will this be a never-ending contribution that you're asking for?
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's a really good point. And there's a real risk of that happening, which is why we've developed this memorandum of understanding with the Ministry of Education in Malawi. And it's the second version of that memorandum of understanding that we've had. So we've been working in Malawi now for the last 10 years, and the first memorandum of understanding is now coming to an end. And we are now re-editing that to be able to implement this training in all teacher training colleges in Malawi. So we want to embed this as a pedagogy into the teacher training system. And we want to go one step further than that. We want to train the lecturers who train the young teachers to be able to do this. So we want to go upstream in the education system to Domasi College of Education, where the lecturers are trained, and ensure that we are genuinely building capacity in Malawi to make this a sustained and sustainable intervention.
I have a question. So far, you've impacted 9,000 marginalized girls in Malawi.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the size of the market. How many marginalized girls are in upper primary in Malawi, and 9,000 represents what share of that market?
Yeah, it's a fairly small share. The market is big. As I said at the beginning, less than 50% of girls finish primary school. So we have the girls in primary school who are at risk of dropping out because of early marriage and pregnancy, but we also have the girls who never even get into primary school. It's a huge number of girls out there. So the demand is large. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask just a couple of questions?
Please.
Quick
Yeah,
ones.
yeah,
Just
please.
quick answers.
Yeah,
huh?
go for it, Tarek, yeah.
You mentioned the MOU.
Yeah.
What is the nature of the MOU? Is it that the government has asked you to do a certain task in the government, or is it a generic open MOU that you may look into different services you provide to the government? What is exactly the clauses?
Yeah.
I mean, the main ones. What is your task in that MOU?
Yeah, it's a good question. Theatre for Change is the service provider of choice to the government of Malawi for life skills education to pre-service teachers and their lecturers. So that's the nature. It's very specific. We deliver a very specific
And you're
training.
planning to expand on that in terms of tasks
Absolutely.
in the next 5 years.
Yeah, in terms of tasks and in terms of reach as well.
And how long you mentioned you've been there for 10 years.
10 years, yeah.
But how long the program has been running, this specific program?
It's been running for 10 years.
Also 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's funded by DFID.
It's funded by DFID now. It's been funded in the past by DFID Malawi, by Christian Aid, by Comic Relief, a whole range of different funders.
And you're planning to have government endorsement after that to go into scale?
Yeah.
But will you guarantee that there will be a government buy-in?
Without a doubt. One of the key people in the government who are responsible for developing the Memorandum of Understanding from the Ministry of Education is a director on our board of directors in Malawi, because Theatre for a Change Malawi is a separate organization. So we have a very close relationship with the government, because we know that without that, it simply will be, as I think your question is suggesting, and Raj, yours too, it will be money into the sand. Yeah.
And when you mention the girls who left and 92% of those girls came back, how do you measure that?
It's against the baseline. So on the baseline, none of those girls were in school. They were all out of school girls. And so we measure that against the control group, and we can see that against the control group, 92% of these girls re-enrolled.
Do you know whether they stick in school? How long, what does that re-enrollment really mean?
Well, we'll see. That's exactly what we want to prove over the next 5 years. We want to follow these girls, support them, and we want to see them not just finish primary school, we want to see them go to secondary school. So I'm sure everyone's seen the statistic outside, on the board outside, about for every girl who goes to primary school, when she becomes a mother, there's a 36% less chance that her children are going to get malaria. And that's just one of the health benefits and education benefits that comes from children going through to secondary school.
Thank you, Peter.
That-
Just to continue a little bit more, probing on the theory of change. Can you hear me?
Sure.
All right. Probing on the theory of change, picking up Tariq's comments and about the efficiency of scaling that you propose.
Yeah.
So around the theory of change, it would be really important to make sure that this midterm evaluation from June last year
Yeah,
really results in a long-term maintenance of attendance.
absolutely.
Picking up on this, you mentioned in the first minute and also in your written description that the core of your theory of change is that improving sexual and reproductive health increases attendance and enrollment and will lead to better learning. Yet the results you describe, other than a statistically significant decrease in sexual activity, don't discuss sexual and reproductive health. Do you have sufficient evidence to support the theory of change that you're trying to scale?
Well, the external evaluators, when they completed the midline last June, gave us that statistic about them being less sexually active, which obviously puts them less at risk, but also said that they felt our theory of change stood up, that it had a strong rationale. So at this point, we just have from them the if you like, the support and the justification that the theory of change stands. We'll see when we do the end line this June whether there is that chain of events that we want to see.
And if we just press on a little more, you describe a couple of other outcomes in confidence and literacy.
Yeah.
And only in the enrollment category do you provide a comparison to control.
Yeah.
So perhaps you have it, but it's a statement that if I were to fund this 17 million,
Sure.
I would need to go on more than feeling.
Oh, absolutely,
Just
100%.
feeling.
Yeah.
But then let's come to the numbers of scale.
Yeah.
Please.
Just to play back, as I understood it, you have, and I calculated very quickly, you have right now a cost of about $444 per girl impacted now. And when you increase, that's the 4
Actually
million
slightly
euros.
higher. Yeah.
So is it rough ballpark?
No, it's nearly double that.
It's going to be double that in the new, when you ask for 17 million and aim to reach 18,000. So even if it's higher, that's even emphasizing the point I want to raise with you.
Yeah, sure.
It's already a rather high cost if you look at the overall scheme in the market, so to speak. And right now you reach, for every girl, you reach one, for every 40 girls, you have one agent of change. And with your increase, it will be going to 36 girls, so even less. So just like you to talk us through the thinking and the rationale for spending almost more than double per girl
Sure.
and reaching less per trainer, and the thinking that is behind that perceived lack of efficiency or decrease of efficiency, one would say.
No, it's a really good question. And it appears expensive, doesn't it, for every girl like Toko to spend that much. But what we see is we're creating these circles of support around her. So it's not just the change that's happening in her. It's not just the numbers of girls. It's also the schools that are involved and also the communities around those schools. And then on a wider basis, the national change in the education system. So we're not just bringing about a change in individual girls. And it's really important to understand that. That what we're talking about here is a change in the education system, where girls are able to enter the education system and stay in the education system. So it's a much wider spread change than just the number of girls.
And that would then be probably reflected in your baseline and your outcome measurements.
In the baseline and the end line, yeah.
And a last quick question is, it sounds that this agent of change concept, which sounds really intriguing.
Yeah.
It sounds wonderful, however, it seems like it must be quite complicated. And I wonder if you can just explain to us the tipping point. What is not the whole process, but the tipping point and the risks of being able to assume you can convert a group of outstanding young women into agents of change?
Yeah.
What is the risk involved in that?
The risk,
as you scale.
yeah. There are a number of risks. One of the main things we found is that young women who come into the program, when they get married, sometimes follow their husbands to a different town, and they can drop out of the program, which is why we need support and backup agents of change teachers. There's also a risk that they find the gender power balance in primary schools really challenging, because these are primary schools where young female teachers very rarely get posted. So we provide them with a lot of support through our monitoring and evaluation team and through school health and nutrition officers who work in each district to be able to do what they do best, which is to facilitate this process with marginalized girls in a supportive environment. So we pay for their housing, we pay for their transport, we give them a bicycle to be able to go out into the community to get the girls into school. So we give them as much support as possible because we know that it's a tough environment for them to be working in. They're also members of a Facebook group, and these 350 young women have really developed a strong sense of solidarity. So when you see it's a closed Facebook group, but when you see their Facebook group and how they're talking to each other about what they're doing and the photos they're uploading about the activities in their girls' clubs, you get this sense of a real sense of cohesion between the agents of change. And they're on a bit of a mission, to be honest. And that's something we're obviously encouraging.
Just a question about you're asking for $17 million?
Yeah.
And that's about $300,000 a month for 5 years?
Yeah.
How do you justify those expenses as an OPEX? That's larger than any OPEX for a corporate.
It's larger than?
An OPEX, an operating cost for a corporate running. So what's your
Okay.
breakdown in terms of $300,000 per month in operation cost?
Right. So this is all implementation. The operating costs, the staff costs are relatively low. So this breaks down into two parts effectively. So what we have to begin with is we have $12 million being used for implementation of the project in Malawi to reach those 18,000 girls that we want to reach and to double the number of agents who change teachers.
Okay. What
Yeah.
was it? What's the number?
So
To reach how many girls?
to 18,000.
No. Do you know the percentage? How many
Of-
girls would you cover in Malawi with the 17 million?
Of all the girls in Malawi, the
Yeah.
percentage we cover, I don't know the percentage, I'm afraid. I can find out. So it breaks down into those two parts. There's the $12 million of implementation in Malawi, and then there's $5 million of what you might call operating costs in terms of recruiting new agents of change teachers to work on an international basis with larger organizations. Because what we want to do as an organization is not to replicate infrastructure. We don't want to open up another office in Rwanda, another office in Burundi, another office in another country. We want to work through other organizations who can use our methodology to achieve what they want to achieve. So in July of this year, we're going to be working in the DRC with Oxfam, who want to use this methodology to reach marginalized girls and women that they're working with. And as an organization, we think this is the most cost-effective and impactful way of working. So keeping operational costs low, but impact high.
But the 12 million to implement the program
Yeah.
in Malawi,
Yeah.
what's your biggest expense out of it?
The biggest expense is supporting the agents who change teachers and the girls in the project. So for example, we buy disposable, recyclable sanitary pads for all the girls in the project. That's 18,000 girls. And it's a huge amount of recyclable sanitary pads that we need to get out to the girls in the remote rural schools. We buy bicycles for the women to be able to go out and find those girls in the first place. So there are quite a lot of overhead costs in terms of resources. And then we have to train the agents of change teachers themselves, which is a very intense process because they themselves come from the same cultural and social background of feeling unable to challenge the gender norms, which effectively they need to do to be able to bring this about. So it's a really intensive training that they go through.
We only have a couple of more minutes of cold-blooded questioning, so go ahead.
Very cold-blooded. May I ask you just a follow-up question on there? So in terms of your primary cost drivers, because you mentioned a number of activities and efforts
Yeah.
that you apply because you're using this integrative, holistic approach.
Exactly.
So the sanitary packs, the bicycles, and the is it the staff cost for training?
For
Are
training
those your
of
top
this.
3 cost drivers as
Yeah.
part of the 12 million?
Yes.
And have you considered, in terms of partnerships with other organizations, primarily around kind of the manufacturers of these sanitary packs, or organizations or companies that have strong distribution channels that could apply? I'm just curious if you've explored those channels.
Yeah, we have. We actually source our reusable sanitary pads through an organization in Uganda because we couldn't find one in Malawi. So it wasn't sustainable to issue the girls with disposable sanitary pads every month. So now we issue recyclable sanitary pads. And the only place we could get them was an organization in Uganda. But we'd like to explore ways in which they can skill some of our staff in Malawi, because we have 65 members of staff in Malawi, and quite a large office. To be able to manage this project would be really exciting.
I believe you didn't mention it, but it's there in the case study about IGRA.
Yeah.
Do you work with CAMFED in Malawi?
We don't actually, no. No,
Are
we know of them, but we don't work on a project together.
Would you mind
No,
working with them?
No, we'd love to work with them.
Yeah?
They work in a very similar process to us.
But would you mind if the funding gets routed through CAMFED and they manage you guys?
No, we'd be very happy for that. We sub-grant on a number of grants. And we sub-grant, for example, through Concern on a project in Nsanje in the south of Malawi.
Okay.
We've got to wrap up in a second. Let me just ask one last question, which is, to what degree do you have local Malawi people running this project?
to I would say a 90% degree. So of the 65 staff who work in the office in Malawi, 90% of those are Malawian. All of our facilitators are Malawian.
And what about at the leadership level?
At leadership level, we have a roughly 50-50 split. Yeah.
Great. We need to move on to the next presentation. If you have more questions, we may get to them at the very end. Thank you very much, Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please, a round of applause.
Thanks. Cheers. Thank you.
I welcome Health Poverty Action from Rwanda.
Thank you. Hi. Thanks for having me over. Thanks for hearing me out. So I'm Annalise Stewart. I'm here for Health Poverty Action. We work in 14 countries across Africa, Asia, and Central America, and we work mainly with marginalized communities. So to give you a bit of background on our project, Rwanda is classified as a least developed country. It's still recovering from a genocide, and it ranks 157 out of 182 on the Human Development Index, which is quite low. Looking at education, enrollment of boys and girls at primary school level is actually on par. However, when you look at secondary school level, there's a 7.5% drop every year for girls. So that means that by the time you get to university education, we've got about 65% enrollment for boys against 35% for girls. So we thought that that was obviously quite a dramatic issue, and so we did a needs assessment in 2012, looking at trying to understand the reasons why girls do drop out of school and how we could try and come up with some solutions. So we found 6 main reasons why girls do drop out of schools are prohibitive costs of education and education materials, lack of opportunities after school, after education, teenage pregnancies, unwanted teenage pregnancies, and missing school during menstruation, so very similar to the case in Malawi. Finally, we've got sexual harassment and unsafe and unsanitary school environments. We found that in Rwanda, some schools have got a ratio of pupil to toilet of about 1 to 60, which is extremely high. The government standard is 35 to 1. So in response to that, we wanted to design a project that was holistic, self-sustainable, and integrated to try and address all of these issues. And we wanted to focus on improving demand for education amongst girls in Rwanda, and also improving the relevance of education. And the theory of change is that by doing that, we would improve attendance, retention, and enrollment. And so we developed a project which is working in 28 schools in the southern district of Rwanda, in Nyaruguru, and we're targeting about 18,000 girls. And we've got 4 innovative components to our project. The first one is about increasing income for education, and we're working with a partner, Teach Man to Fish, on a methodology called Education That Pays for Itself. And the concept is that we would train schools in practical skills and soft skills, and support schools to develop student-led businesses. We've so far set up 28 school businesses, of which 77% are generating school income. And the idea of these school businesses is not only can they teach these practical skills, but they also teach them soft skills, communication, leadership, things like this. And the long-term sustainability of these businesses, that eventually, once they become profitable enough and strong enough, they can reinvest into the school. So that's sort of a major component of the sustainability of our project. The second aspect of our project is working with the most marginalized women and girls in the communities. So we select them using a community consultation approach, which is a traditional approach in Rwanda, whereby we unite local village leaders and communities to select the most marginalized girls, and we work with them to set up these mother-daughter clubs. So these are the girls that are most at risk or already have dropped out of school. And we trained these mothers and their daughters. We've trained 72 clubs so far with 900 members on mother and daughter communication techniques. So the idea is to break down the barriers of communication between mothers and their daughters so that they can actually discuss the issues why girls are not attending school, and try and come up with solutions as a community. And we found it actually has a massive impact at the community level. Then we also do some income generation activities. Again, this is we provide some small startup capital for the women and their daughters to conduct these small income generation activities, and we can maybe go into some more details about what they are later on. And finally, we also conduct some training on sexual and reproductive health, again, so that women and their daughters can make informed choices about their sexual health. And the third component of the project is looking at making the school environment safer and more girl-friendly. So we're building eco-sand toilets, So these toilets are lockable toilets, which actually through a process of dehydration, turns human feces into safely handled compost, which you can use in school gardens. So there's two components to the toilets. Is not only are they safe for the girls, they're lockable from the inside, but they're also being used as a yield increasing sort of mechanism for the crops, the school gardens, because most schools in Rwanda have got their own school gardens. And finally, we've built also 14 changing rooms. So these are designated changing rooms where the girls can have access to hand washing facilities. They can wash sanitary towels. There's also sanitary towels available, and there's also a resting environment. So when they have their menstruation and they're tired and they just need an hour outside of school, they can just go in there. And the facilities have been managed by women who are designated within the school. So again, ensuring that girls can actually access and continue to attend school when they're experiencing their menstruation. And the fourth component of the project is looking at increasing awareness of the barriers to girls' education, and also looking at increasing demand. So we've partnered with a radio program, a soap opera called Rwanda, which has been operating since 2008 in Rwanda. It was actually set up by Health Poverty Action at the time, but it's now been sort of localized and been managed completely as a separate entity to HPA. But we're incorporating, again, some education messaging in this soap opera. And we know that that has a 70% listenership across Rwanda, so it's a massive impact. And it's an ongoing process. We're just incorporating with these professional soap writers, incorporating some key messages that we think are relevant to the context. So moving on to the monitoring and evaluation of the project, we have, similarly to your projects, a quasi-experimental monitoring and evaluation model with an intervention and control group. We actually have two intervention groups that are receiving separate sort of elements of our project so that we can separate the impact of different aspects of our project. And we're tracking a cohort of 800 girls. So at midline, which was in August sort of 2015, about 2 years after the beginning of implementation, we've shown statistically significant improvement on attendance. We've got a 1% improvement over and above a control group in our treatment group. In retention, we've got 8% improvement over and above our control group. In learning, we've also found in local language, Kinyarwanda, we've got a 6% improvement, whereas in English we have 3% improvement. So we think these are really good impact already to show at that level at midline. And in terms of leverage for the program, we've got really good buy-in from national government. The Ministry of Education has incorporated our girls' changing room into the national girls' education policy, which was published in late 2015. And finally, the Ministry of Gender and Family Promotion wants to replicate our mother-daughter club. So the methodology wants to be sort of rolled out nationally, but there's a lack of funding to do that. So in terms of scaling up and why we're here, we'd like to scale this up to 130 additional schools on top of the 28 we're currently working in. That would target an additional 85,000 girls. And the way we would do that is by working very closely with the Ministry of Education to set up sort of satellite offices, to actually select the schools that are most marginalised across Rwanda. So we wouldn't just apply a blanket. It would be, we'd want to have to select the most marginalised schools against the poorest schools, the girls, where the girls are most likely to be actually dropping out and have the most sort of unsalable facilities. And looking at our budget, we're looking at $10.5 million over 3 years. Now that's quite heavy front-loaded because we would be scaling up sort of in the first 2 years of the project to 130 schools and then focusing our third year on actually strengthening our impact. That's, I think, it's written down, but I think that's $80,000 per school, and it comes down to $124 per head for girls, which we think is really good value for money for the kind of impact that we're looking at. Thanks for your time. I think you might have some questions. I've got obviously a bit more detail here on the activities, but I'm sure you'll come to that. Thank you.
Which of our dragons is ready to jump in?
So I feel a bit
Wanna
awkward
start
being in
us
the middle
off?
like this.
I was just about to say, you were supposed to stand there,
Well, I know.
face us,
I know, but it's a bit awkward.
because you keep on twisting and...
I'm
but
really sorry.
I'll tell you.
Sorry.
Your program, I don't see how it's linked with the government and Ministry of Education in terms of how would you measure all of this? It's very complicated, especially with the toilets. And is it access that you want? Do you want girls into the education system? And I don't see a proper link. You mentioned that the Ministry of Education has approved to have changing rooms. Is that it?
So
No
what-
endorsement to the program?
So what they've done is they've incorporated our model into the girls' education policy. So anyone that wants to replicate our model has to apply our standards and our methodology. So we think that's a huge impact, sort of that's showing quite a lot of buy-in.
What are
from-
you trying to achieve
We're-
here?
we're-
To
we're-
increase enrollment rates?
So our theory of change is that by increasing, yes, we want to increase attendance and enrollment of girls. We want to make sure the girls are in school because the Ministry of Education is actually focusing a lot on supply side of education. There's a lot of teacher trainings, there's a lot of facility improvements, but there's not very much focus on actually the fact that girls are just not in school, and that's
But
what
for
we're
the
trying
toilets,
to address.
how would you guarantee? I don't know if the system really works, to be honest with you. It's not working in developed nations.
Sure.
But having the water going to gardens and then selling crops, let's say, how do you guarantee that the money will not go into the pockets of the parents and not servicing the girl child to school?
So we do that by working with the schools, and we actually are, the way that the marginalised girls are going to be supported, so educational costs are going to be covered, is determined prior to the profit being made. So we actually devise strategies whereby we decide how are the girls going to be selected and which, how the money is going to be spent. So there's a lot of advanced warning being done and advanced preparation, negotiation with the schools, with the parent-teacher committees, and general local government. We've actually got, in terms of the school businesses, we've got currently into conversation with local districts to ensure that the management of the school businesses is taken over from the project after the end of the project. So this, again, making sure that there's a general oversight in terms of the financial income and gain, but also just a general management.
May I build on exactly on this question? You're elaborating that there are a lot of complexities. There are many parts in the model. You talked about the mother-daughter clubs, the businesses in the schools, the student-led businesses. There's coaching, there's media. And I think it would be helpful to understand, given the complexity, what do you see as the minimum critical specificity? So the most essential part of all of your parts that helps to achieve or is most important to get the results of enrollment and attendance. That would be helpful to understand from you. What are the most valuable elements and what is nice to have?
I mean, we haven't yet. We're going to be studying, in the final year of our project, we're going to spend a lot more time working on our value for money and working on sort of operational learning and trying to actually differentiate between the different elements of the project. We do appreciate that it is a complex project and that it was designed as a complex project because we wanted to try out 4 innovative methodologies. That's why it's so complex. So in the final year of the project, we're going to spend a lot more time working with our external consultant to try and really separate, and that's why we've got 3 cohorts of girls, so we've got 2 treatments and 1 control. It's so that we can separate the school businesses from the wash facilities, so from the mother-daughter clubs, and also obviously through our household survey, we again trying to separate from the people who are listening to radio or not. So it's something that we're going to be focusing on now, and I think in the first few years of the project, we're really focused on, ramping up the activities, and there's a lot going on. As you said, there's construction work, there's media work, there's working at the local community level, and so now we want to actually sort of take a bit of a, now that we're up and running, we want to actually sort of start look at the detail of the impact and the deeper outcomes.
So allow me to probe just a little more. Complexity is okay if it's necessary, and I think I would just urge you to really pay attention to that kind of outcome tracking in the next few months. And to come back to one thing you said, the whole program starts with student-led businesses.
Yeah.
And you talk about the generation of soft skills, but also funds to support other girls to come. So if I understand, it means that children are working together to create businesses, and the general profit is used for the community?
It's used for schools, so it's educational cost. Yeah.
So do you have outcomes or data on the percentage of children or girls who are now able to come, the increase in support? Any outcomes or evidence showing that the businesses are creating revenue that is actually effectively able to increase the enrollment of children?
Sure. I don't actually have any sort of fixed figures on the income, but that will be in our midline, so I can share a report with you if you'd like to read that. I'm not able to answer your question off the top of my head.
Is that a core element of your theory of change?
Sorry?
Isn't that, according to how it's framed, that seems to be a core part of the
it's more
financial...
of it's a sustainability. It's sort of, yes, so in that sense it is. But and we know that they are generating a profit. I just can't tell you how much. We do know they are generating a profit.
And just on that point, is there any part of your evaluation that looks at whether there could be any economic displacement for other existing businesses that were selling those products to the schools? For example, are there local farmers who otherwise would have sold food products to the schools that now are losing their jobs?
Also, with regards to the actual school businesses, there's a long phase of market research which we do with, with parents within the schools, and we're not trying to set up, we're not trying to sort of replace another business. We're trying to find a space within the market for a new business and a new business idea, and that's the whole concept of the project. We're trying to lift these kids out of poverty on their own account and not by replacing something that's already there. So in that sense, no, I don't think we're replicating anything. We're adding, if anything, to the value of the local markets.
In this district,
Go ahead, please.
in the district that you've piloted this program, how representative is this district of the other areas that you want to expand into?
So, so the district that we're working in is one of the most isolated of Rwanda, but I mean it's most southern. It's the most farthest from Kigali. But we think that there are similar districts across Rwanda that we could be working in. Obviously, we wouldn't probably be, we wouldn't be working in Kigali, which doesn't make sense. But there are other districts that would be certainly on par in terms of marginalization for girls. So.
Yeah, you said that the schools would cost about $80,000.
Yeah.
What's the contribution of the Ministry of Education or the government in helping you building the schools? One, and then what happens after the 3 years? Who's going to run them? Are you guys going to keep on running them, or?
So we're not actually building schools. We're building facilities within the schools. So
It's just the physical spaces.
the schools already
provided by
exist,
the
and
government.
we're not creating additional schools. We're working within the National Ministry of Education's realm, and we're currently working with them. We have, similarly to the previous project, we've got a memorandum of understanding to be working within those schools and improving the facilities within those schools. So the expense the expense that we're looking at is actually building these eco-sand toilets, which don't come cheap because they are actually expensive up front, but they have a really long sustainability sort of lifeline compared to traditional toilets, pit toilets. So we're looking at about 50 or 60 years further down the line where these toilets are still being used. Sorry, going back to your question.
The contribution of the Ministry
so
of Education, and then for the sustainability part, who's going to run
They're not
them?
currently contributing any money because they don't have the ability to contribute any money. But in terms of sustainability, so we're working, again, the way that we work in Rwanda is working very much with the local community. So the facilities themselves are being built by local men. So we're training the local men to build the facilities, and they're trained in the operation and maintenance of the facilities. And the idea is that then the management of these, so we call them water user committees, these are then managed, the management of these water user committees is transferred to the local government. So that's the district government. And that's already happened for all of our toilets. So we've already handed over the management of these to the district halfway through the project. And it's, I guess this answers your question, but that's the idea of the construction workers. We're not actually doing the construction ourselves. We're doing it through local men, so that basically they're able to then continue to maintain them.
But how much is the cost of this sanitary thingy?
So do you want to know?
Both projects is apparently it's like extremely high cost.
It's a high cost, so I can tell you exactly. The toilets are priced at 2,800 per unit, and that's the reason behind that is because there's not just construction costs. There's manual labour, and also they're quite complex toilets in themselves. So the toilets have got a helix system, drying system, where the human feces has been dried over a course of a certain month, and then it's sort of kept in a vault. So we've got 2 vaults, which are quite, a lot of materials are going into these 2 vaults, and then obviously the material is dried and then put onto can be used for other purposes. But each block is an expensive, yes, we appreciate that is an expensive cost to come up with, but we think on the long run they're a lot more better value for money than a typical pit toilet which you'd have to get replaced after 5 or 6 years.
Would you eat the crops from?
Yes, well, so the crops have been sold on
Would
local.
you personally eat the crops from these toilets?
I don't think I'd have any issues with it. Yeah,
It's organic.
I visit the projects myself. It's not. I think there's a.
Did you eat? Did you try?
They weren't when. I'll make sure I do, so I can answer that question next time someone asks. But I think I think it's the idea of these toilets is a bit off-putting, perhaps. But I think when you actually look at it in practice, they increase the crop yield quite significantly, and it means that not only can we increase nutrition in the schools, but we can also, any surplus vegetables can be sold off to the local market. So then again, we're looking at sustainability aspect and increasing income for education. So I think they have, the toilets are actually bringing in sort of a lot of the elements of our projects together.
Is it off-putting to the local community, or do they not have a problem with it?
So we do a lot of work with local communities actually on training them, and a big part of the initial cost again is by working with local men, local children. We have school clubs. We have a lot of different structures within which we're trying to disseminate messages that this is not only okay, it's safe, and it's a positive. And I think looking at the big picture, when you've got a lot of malnutrition children across the country, I think it's actually a pretty good.
Is it approved by the Ministry of Health? Do they come and check?
Well, I can't answer that question specifically, but we have been in contact with the Ministry of Health. I'm not sure if I can say it's been proven because I don't know if we had that discussion. But
You have a lot of detail about how you'd go forward in the next 3 years. And I'm curious, you're asking for 12 million. If we were today...
Sorry, it's 10.5. We've reviewed those figures, but yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 10.5, let's say tomorrow we would double it for you. What would you do tomorrow differently that you can't do today because of constraints, funding constraints?
Sorry, so if we doubled the amount that we're
Let's say
asking
you got
for,
double your ask
Yeah.
tomorrow, based on everything you've learned in the last few years and the complexities that you've described. If finances weren't a constraint tomorrow, how would you go forward? What would you do?
Well, I think that I don't think we've proven that our theory of change works at midline. We've already got some statistically significant outcomes, which we think is great. So we don't think we would change much. I think we would tweak some of the components. For example, we've learned that some of the startup capital for the schools that we had budgeted at the origin of the project was actually too high, and we're pushing. There's no point in pushing money onto schools when they don't need it. They just need small lump sums to start the school businesses. So things like that we would tweak. But in more general terms, we think that our actual project approach and our the way that we've coined the whole thing actually works. I think there would be some economies of scale in terms of the construction work. That there is a lot of ways that we would be saving money in certain areas, and so we'd have more money to put elsewhere. But in general terms, I don't think we would change much. We would probably just look at replicating in more schools.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question about the income-generating businesses.
Sure.
Could you speak a little bit more in detail about what are these businesses? Are the girls and parents involved? How many hours in the day do they spend on the business vis-a-vis their education? You're at midline now. I'm assuming midline within the 5 years. In terms of the income generated from the businesses relative to the cost, for instance, of these toilets, so how much of that cost has been recouped thus far? Just would love to learn more about the businesses.
With cost recuperation, I think in the first year of the businesses, we don't actually the profit is reinvested in the businesses because I think we want them to become more sustainable in the long term. So I think there's a very strict sort of discussions with the schools about this, that we need to be careful about not reinvesting too soon into things outside of the business. In terms of what we actually do, sorry, I've lost the question.
I'm sorry, what kind of businesses are they, and how much time is spent on them?
So maybe I can go back to the training. So obviously we do some practical skills training, so things like market research, as we've discussed, budget management, activity planning, things like that. And then we also do some training on leadership, communications. So that's the training aspect. We don't train the children themselves. We actually train parent and teacher clubs, who then sort of they with the school club that's how the sort of school clubs are managed, is by the parents and teachers. We don't manage the school clubs. Going on to what type of businesses we have, we have so we've got, I think, some, stationary businesses, so sort of just the purchasing and selling of businesses. We've got some very, sorry, I'm losing my words. Honey production. We've got some pig rearing. We've got some banana crops. We've got lots of different types of, mostly agricultural businesses. But looking at, again with pig rearing, for example, initially we bought X amount of pigs, and now we're looking at we've got some, some pigs have got to an age where they can actually reproduce. We're going to get more pigs, etc. So again, we're looking at these businesses we're looking at long-term businesses, business plans, and that's why there's a lot of time that's been spent in the preparation of the business plan rather than just sort of launching them from the offset. In terms of the actual amount of time spent, I can't answer that question specifically, but I'll be able to get back to you on that if that's okay.
Any final questions?
Yes, you mentioned in the brief that your aim is to spread this out across the most marginalized communities in Rwanda. Have you had any communities coming to you and asking for the implementation, asking you to bring it to them?
Well, I mean, we currently don't work at a national level in Rwanda, so we don't have contacts within these communities, and that's why we need to. The scale-up plan would need to be really progressive, and we'd be looking at maybe 70 schools by year 1 and then 130 by year 2. So we don't have these conversations with the communities, but it's definitely within where we're working. When we had to do the selection process, I think the discussions that we had with the communities we had a limited amount of funding, and it was a difficult discussion that we had to have, managing everyone's expectations. And in that sense, we do have communities asking for the facilities that we've been contributing, but not necessarily at a nationwide level, because we're not implanted at that level.
All right, I'll ask the last question, the same one I asked Patrick, which is to what degree is your team on the ground made up of Rwandans?
100%.
Including all the leadership?
Well, I mean, everyone in Rwanda is Rwandan, yeah. So, I mean, obviously, I'm not Rwandan, but I'm based in London, and I support more on the contract side, but all our team on the program side is Rwandan. And I think that actually is a major sort of contributing factor to our projects, is that we have really good contact with local communities within which we work.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So in the few minutes that we have left, we're going to kind of pull back the curtain on maybe how funders think. No one here is committing to any funding, unless you want to. But what we want to do is kind of hear your reactions, just kind of rapid fire quickly. Are these projects you would consider? Are they too risky? What are some of the things that run through your mind? Please.
For Malawi, the issue with Malawi is you want $17 million for the next 5 years, and you're not certain on how much percentage of girls would have access to schooling and get education. And you're talking about even quality education at the same time. So to me, that is a very important figure to know what percentage, or at least you have the numbers. I don't know how many girls have issues in Malawi not having access to the schooling system. So if that figure was available, it would have been great. You mentioned a lot of points about government alignment and scale up, which is good, but I really think $17 million for 5 years in such a program is a bit too much when you don't have, although it's been running, you mentioned, for the past 10 years, 17 million to me sounds too much for 5 years for a program like this. It has a lot of soft components into it. It has technical, but it has soft. For Rwanda, although I see a lot of innovation into it, but I don't see any government alignment. I don't see what's the role of the Minister of Education, Minister of Health with this water coming out of the toilets, and I don't see how we can measure all of this. And to me, it's just very hard. And you want the funding for the next 3 years? For me, I'm going to wait 4 years just to see how impactful this is, because I don't see any sustainable impact into this. So I would risk $2 to $3 million with Malawi, and I'll wait 4 years just to see the impact for Rwanda.
Thank you for those honest comments. Rhonda.
Quite simply, for Malawi, first of all, both programs have achieved a lot, but given that you've been running for 10 years, I really would have hoped and expected to have more evidence for the theory of change. I think you believe you have it. I don't think it's been demonstrated to us here today, and I would be happy to fund you a portion for a very good look back at the best outcome analysis you can do retrospectively. I think that's essential, and that's missing in order to feel that scaling is worthwhile. That was, for me, the big issue. For Rwanda, sustainability is a very big component. I think we don't want to undermine the importance of complex problems being treated in complicated ways, but this needs to be so carefully considered when scaling up, and especially in the sustainability. Every single part of that supply chain needs its sustainability mechanism, and we just didn't hear evidence of that today.
Joe.
Yeah, I see kind of a risk in terms of the partnership with the government for both projects. It's not clear what their role is. I've worked on the ground in Africa with different initiatives, and if they don't own a component, they will not drive it with you. So they're going to let you do most of the work, bringing almost nothing to the table. So it's whether they need to invest part of it, whether it's in people or with money, but they need to be really kind of a part owner of the project. Otherwise, it's a high risk in terms of the project to go on. So that's the risk part for me, for both projects in Rwanda and Malawi.
Thank you. Farstu?
I think that both projects are highly innovative and very creative. I think in Malawi, the focus on building confidence and assertiveness to combat sexual abuse and or to improve sexual health is a very creative approach. And I think as an organization, we like to invest in organizations that take risk and try different creative approaches. I think the full amount would probably be unlikely, but I think room for scale and working very closely with you up front to develop more detailed metrics it's so difficult, right? So it's the theory of change. There's no science to this, but applying certain metrics to each component and then figuring out, okay, where does government fall? Where do private businesses fall? Where do other organizations fall? I think working at that level of detail with one another, and then funding a portion of the ask, I think would be something that we would be open to because it's such a creative approach. In terms of Rwanda, I think in both instances, your approach very early on, wanting to work with government and ministries is phenomenal. I've personally witnessed a number of organizations and projects that do not work with government at all, especially at the national level, maybe at the local level. So that's great that you're thinking about scale at that level. And I think similarly, I think jumping from my understanding, from one district and then going from the size that you're at now to it's quite a large jump. But I think over time, again, developing very particular metrics together, and that's how we work generally. We spend a number of months with you pulling these metrics together and testing things out. And I just wanted to add, as an organization, we generally don't, in terms of the size of both of your organizations, we wouldn't necessarily do one-to-one funding. We generally work through intermediaries. It sounds like you would both be open to sub-grants. So just a perspective of this.
One more thing that I forgot to add. Probably the partnership should be also available with the private sector. Doing everything on your own is probably too much. Maybe you can partner with the providers of the sanitary stations. Somehow they can whether reduce the cost or just selling it to you at cost instead of just making a profit out of it. And they will kind of drive also, if they're a multinational, this is from my experience as well, is that they will drive that partnership or that local presence where they have offices and they have distribution or they have implementation networks already that you can use and you can leverage on it. So that's one of the aspects that I would recommend, is to partner with the private sector as well.
Thank you. And I think Tariq, you had one last thing you wanted to say.
Although this is not real, the commitments, but honestly, I like your program. I have my director of programs there. I would truly want to look into this and truly maybe looking into investing. Okay, so you can have a word with Yusuf over there.
Let me just say that this is very exciting. It's very exciting to hear the openness of our panel, of our dragons. We at DevEx, we're a media platform. We have journalists covering projects like this. We don't get to actually give out grants. But one of the trends that we have seen, that we've covered quite a bit, is the bar being raised on projects like these. And I think you hear that from our dragons here, right? Philanthropy has moved pretty dramatically from passion and interest to really science, data, metrics-driven approaches. It's not all the way there yet by any means. There's quite a spectrum, but this is the direction, clearly. And so increasingly, those of us who want to do good in the world need to think in the terms that you've heard from my fellow dragons. They were asked to be particularly tough and cold-blooded, and I thank them for that. I know that all of us
We
are.
apologize for that.
And I know that all of us were ready to jump out of our chairs and give you both a hug for the good work you're doing, because it is easy to sit here, but it's hard to be doing what you're doing. So congratulations on all that you've achieved, and thank you for being a part of this today. Thank you.
Thank you.